Welcome to Jakarta, welcome to Indonesia, and welcome to round 10 of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship. And what a place this is, by the way. We are back here for a second time, but this time it's with a vengeance. It's a double header, which means double jeopardy, which means double points. And what's more, things could not be much closer. At the top, as many as 6 drivers could lead the championship standings at the end of play tomorrow. And there are only 7 races left, 2 of which are happening this weekend, which means we are officially in the business end of the season. Delighted to be joined by a man who laughs in the face of jet lag, Ollie Askew, former Andretti driver. Let's talk about how far you've come in how many hours. You started in Florida.
Started in Miami. It took me 34 hours to get here.
Commitment, dude. Yes, and how are you
Love
feeling?
I feel good.
Even though it's brutally hot.
It is. It is. I think this is the first or the only weekend of the year where I don't envy these drivers behind us. It is extremely hot. The track layout doesn't help either. There's not much time to take a breather unless you're on the front straigaiway. No, not much. Sorry.
It's what the heat does to you and jet lag, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very hot. Yeah, very difficult for these drivers. Very physically demanding. I remember last year I had to get helped out of the car after the race because, yeah, I just had lost so much water weight. The electrolytes were just completely drained out of me, and yeah, it's going to be a difficult race weekend for these guys.
We're going to talk about heat in a little bit later on, but in terms of the championship, Nick Cassidy, Mr. Consistent. We had to wait 9 races for him to usurp Pascal Wehrlein. He's finally leading, and what a season he's had so far.
Yeah, I think there's so much momentum behind him right now. He's won championships in the past, but not in Formula E. We know that the championship in Formula E is very hard to get. The points are going to be very close all the way to the end of the championship. Yeah, but I think he's calm, cool, collected. That team is working really well, the Jaguar powertrain. Yeah, and a fantastic finish for them in Monaco last time out.
And that was as a result of their back-to-back there, which is why he's now leading standings so far. Do you think he's going to struggle having a target on his back? Saunders calls him the silent assassin. We haven't really spoken about him, but now everyone is.
Yeah, sure. I don't think he has that kind of personality where he's, kind of out here with his chest puffed, out here to prove something. He's, yeah, he's going about his job. Like I said, his team is very capable behind him. He's been there within the team, working really well together in the past, and I think it's just all coming together for him right now. I think he just needs to continue having strong finishes and consistent results, and it's going to be there at the end.
Well, for Nick Cassidy, it's all about looking at winning that potential world title. But for David Beckman, please come on in, my friend. It's all about making your rookie debut. Come on in the middle. Come on, we're all friends here. How on earth are you feeling, by the way, making your debut here in Jakarta?
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I've been in Formula E since last year as a reserve role, and now finally to have the shot to show my potential. I think it's a big honor, and I'm really glad. I think one of the hardest debuts here in Jakarta.
Right.
Yeah?
In some respects, I guess possibly nothing to lose, but also the fact you've been a reserve driver for a couple of seasons now. You've had a chance to learn. You were here as a teenager, so presumably that might help you like it did maybe Jake Hughes.
Yeah, I think it helped for sure. All the simulator work, everything what I've done, I think for sure helped. But also I spoke to Jake when he drove his first race, and he said it's still in the race, and the race weekend completely something different. You can prepare as much as you want, but yeah, everything changes. So in the end, I think it will be more or less a surprise, but I give it my best, and I think I'm well prepared. And yeah, I try to make no mistakes, and let's see where we come out at the end of the weekend.
Rats, yeah, I'd have to disagree. I think you have everything to lose this weekend because we know that this car is capable of winning. How has your preparation been in the sim? We know that simulation is very important in Formula E. Do you feel like you can hit the ground running here this weekend in FP1?
Yeah, to be honest, I think Formula E is very difficult to jump in and be straight on it. We saw also in a bit earlier this season with Kelvin. It's even though they were not so good up to pace, even though it was still you had a gap to teammate, and it's just not neutral. It's just normal. Also last year with Sasha, you cannot jump in and immediately deliver. But I think yeah, you're right. The car is really good. Andretti's doing a mega job together with Porsche. They're doing a really good development of the car, and I think yeah, last year we had also Jake and you had a good, decent speed here around here. So maybe this even is a good opportunity for me. And the car is, you know, maybe the car is really good this weekend, and I can be on it.
That's what we want. Positive thinking.
But still, calm before the storm. And you know, I get in that now in FP1, do my best. You know, get into track in the car and everything. And then tomorrow it's the day where it counts, and Sunday.
So it's a unique situation in that you're replacing Andre Lotterer temporarily, who's currently prepping for Le Mans 24.
Exactly.
Your teammate, you mentioned, Jake Dennis, he's very much in the hunt for that championship.
Yeah.
What have you learned from him by watching him being this close?
Yeah, I've been working with Ollie and Jake already last year, and I mean, Jake already is kind of experienced here in the Formula E, and he obviously brings a lot of confidence. He has a lot of confidence in his driving style, his approachment, and yeah, I learned a lot from him already last year, and also now on the sim preparations, his certain driving style and everything. I think it's better to me now adapt a bit on this, because Jake is doing a great job, and then you know, doing a bit my own style when I have maybe some other races or potential races. But at the moment, I think it's better to adapt, because you know, I will be not on it like this. So it's good to have a benchmark and a reference, and I think it's really helpful for me.
David, you have no idea that this man is the youngest on the grid, brimming with confidence. All the very best of luck in the race tomorrow, by the way. And in case you're wondering what this vest is all about, it's all about keeping ourselves cool, which Saunders found out when he spoke to Kelvin van der Linde yesterday.
So, Kelvin, thank you very much for this exclusive access into the App Cupra garage, because what we have ahead of us is some pretty interesting, unique conditions. We're talking 35-degree heat, 80% humidity. What sort of strain does that put on the car?
In the past, the batteries are normally the limiting factor in Gen 2, Gen 1. With the new Gen 3 car, you can probably expect the battery won't be as big of a limiting factor, just purely because the new car is so much more efficient than the past Gen 2. What we do have now is the new front powertrain. It's more limited by the temperature. You'll see a lot of the guys using this strategically, because naturally when the front FPK starts to overheat, the guys are not as easily able to regen. So that means they're less efficient during the race.
What about tyres though? Surely they're impacted.
I mean, tyres are always a big talking point at the hot races. It's something which is a big challenge for the teams, not only in a race scenario, but also for qualifying. The drivers really need to nail their one lap with the tyres in its perfect operating window.
Interesting. So I want to take full use of this access that you've given us. What can you show me in terms of things to keep drivers cool?
Well, there's a lot of, let's say, in-the-game secrets that we like to use. So here we are in the driver's container. These containers travel with us to pretty much every race around the world. The drivers have all their stuff prepared, drivers' drinks bottles, which our physios are preparing with electrolytes, all that kind of stuff. People think, okay, you turn a steering wheel, go on the throttle pedal. It's really not that simple for these guys. Obviously, the guys are already starting with a formation lap. They're standing on the grid, they're baking in the sun, doing interviews. You know, all that is just taking up energy. We're sweating it out, and then in the race itself, you're going to probably burn another 2 kilograms of body weight, which was obviously only in fluid, which is insane to think about it.
Okay, so as well as keeping hydrated, always important, what else can drivers do to combat heat and humidity?
First of all, we've got a cooling vest. You'll see a lot of the drivers on the grid actually wearing them. You've got to see the human body kind of like an engine. It doesn't go from 0 to 100 instantly. It's a gradual build-up of body temperature. So the more you can delay that process, the better it is for the race. So that's why you'll see the drivers with these cool suits on the grid, trying to stay as cool as possible for pretty much as long as they can. This is pretty much a trick of the trade. It's like a liquid ice. It's a certain spray that the guys use on their underwear. So it gives them a very cooling effect. This lasts for about half an hour. And that's pretty much enough to get you through, half of the race distance. The other half of the race, you're pretty much just hanging on.
What are we looking at? What sort of things are teams doing?
Oh, you can see obviously we have these misting fans, which will obviously help the crew out the back here stay cool. We've got obviously the tents here, giving as much shade as possible. And this is probably where you'll see during the weekend a lot of those pools popping up. So the ice baths, which is obviously for the drivers. It's perfect.
You've got all the right gadgets to keep you cool, but it's one thing saying it, another thing doing it.
It's tough, but that's why we travel the world doing this thing, and we do what we love. And to be honest, there's worse things than sweating a little bit in a race car. So I think we'll be fine.
Thanks for the access, Kelvin. Cheers.
Thanks so much.
That was absolutely fascinating. Just a quick reminder, we are live and we are now just 15 minutes away from FP1 kicking off. But Ollie, the big question there is, in terms of the spray in the underwear, did you go for that yourself?
No, I felt a little underprepared here last year, to be honest. It's going to be important now. It's a doubleheader. Last year was not a doubleheader. So the recovery Saturday night for these drivers and teams is going to be very important. I think we're going to see some ice baths out the back of the garage. And yeah, certainly, oh, here's a little something from last year.
There's that old thing. So what's that currently just slightly above your upper lip there on your filtrum? Is it Tom Selleck? Is it?
I thought that looked good. I mean, at this time last year, the new Top Gun movie came out, right? Okay. And everybody was sporting the stash, so I figured I'd had to.
Who needs Poirot when you've got this guy here, by the way? Yeah. But in terms of the shot we didn't see there, it was you being dragged out of the car afterwards. Yeah. It is unbelievable, these conditions here.
No, I was pleading to the team on the radio coming in on the cool-down lap, hey, when I get out, I need an ice, run down my suit, ice water all over me, because I felt like I was overheating after the race. And, with everything going on track, what you have to think about with the energy, and on that day, the car was slightly oversteery, so I was having to work really hard in the cockpit. And I think I mentioned earlier, constantly having to look for a tow for efficiency, which doesn't allow air to move through that cockpit to help cool down. So with the ambience this hot and this humid, it's really difficult to get away from that.
I cannot imagine the challenges of that, and they'll have to do it twice, by the way, on Saturday and on Sunday, especially for the main protagonists. And talking about two of them, John-Eric Vergne and Mitch Evans caught up with Saunders yesterday, who it's safe to say is earning his money.
So I'm here with John-Eric Vergne. First of all, we have to talk about Monaco, because it started off with a bit of disappointment, but boy, did you make up for it in the race.
Yeah, I mean, it started with a big disappointment. I mean, starting last, it had been a long time I didn't start last in Formula E, and the race was good. I saved quite a lot of energy in the first few laps, and then I went, through the field, and it was good. I mean, clean overtakes, and I was on it, and I am quite happy with the race. I had a lot of fun. Obviously, I was a bit disappointed that there was, the safety car in the end that stopped a bit my comeback. But anyway, I have to be happy with the points of the seventh place, considering where we started and what happened in quali. So, I'm going to take those points and move on.
It's got to mean coming into this race, or these two races we have here in Jakarta, with a lot of confidence, right? Because not even just thinking about Monaco, thinking about last year, you drove a very good race there as well, or here last year.
I mean, we always come on the races with confidence that we can win and deliver a good result. I mean, we prepare for that. I don't need a good race from last year or a good race from the last weekend to be and feel confident. I think you feel confident through the work you're doing with your team, and hard work always pay off, and it's going to pay off.
Well, the main difference this season is that we've got a double header here, so we get double the action, but also double the challenges for you guys as drivers within this heat and the tricky characteristics of racing in this environment.
Yeah, for sure it's going to be tricky. I mean, I remember last year it was really tough, but I don't know how to say it, but I expect the worst to come in those two races, and I expect it so bad that it's going to be much easier than what I thought. So, in any case, we all have the same car to drive, the same heat to deal with, and it's not the first time we race in big conditions, like in hot conditions like this on humid. I've done worse, so I'm going to be okay.
Well, we'll see how it pans out. So, Mitch, we are under the beating hot sun here in Jakarta, but this isn't just a lovely walk with the team. What are we doing right now?
Spending time with you guys.
Oh, no, seriously.
I missed you. It's been a long time since Monaco, right? No, obviously, I mean, we've been here before, so we know the layouts, but what we're trying to look for is if there's been any surface changes, little modifications to the walls, curbs, if the attack mode's maybe slightly moved or something like that, if barriers have changed. Obviously, it's a street track.
Okay, it's also, isn't it kind of a correlation exercise as well between the simulator and real life? The simulator can only simulate so much, but this kind of fills in the gaps.
100%. Look, the sims now are pretty good, especially once we've been there before. We correlate after every race to get it perfect. But then, from year to year, the track can be, as I said, assembled just maybe slightly differently. To be honest, the real test and the real judgment is on the outlap. Okay. But yeah, it's track walks obviously just part of the game. It gives a good insight for the engineers to get a feel for the track, and if I'm relating to certain things, they know what I'm talking about when I'm blasting down the radio. So yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about some of the key challenges of this circuit and what it takes to put together a really good single lap.
It's tricky just because basically, the tires are always kind of out of the window because of the temperature. So the car feels very awkward to drive. The layout's actually really good. It's just it asks a lot from the car because a lot of long entry phases. And yeah, it's a tricky venue.
So last season, we obviously saw all of that come together when you got the race win here. We've already spoken to Jev about that battle that you had last season. Do you feel confident going into this weekend that you can do it again? Maybe not just once, but maybe even twice.
I mean, twice would be amazing. Look, yeah, I feel really good at the moment. We're in a good run of form. And obviously coming back to a track you've had good memories, that always helps. But as I touched on with like the difference between the two generation cars, this car does require something different sometimes in different environments. This is the first time we'll be running this car and also the Hankook tires in these extreme temps. So we have to try and do our homework right and make sure the car is in a good window. So yeah, last year we had it obviously perfect and we need to try and replicate that.
And if you did, that would be a solid thing for the title fight, for sure.
It would help.
Yeah. Cheers, mate. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
So great to catch up there. Two key protagonists, I'd say, for this weekend coming up, because we've got Mitch Evans, who won here last year, and we've got Jean-Eric Vergne. And the reason why he's a protagonist, it isn't just about last season, it's because what happened last time out in Monaco. And we've got a clip here from the race, starting in P22 after a qualifying penalty. Not somewhere this man is used to starting from, but what happened next?
No, definitely not. And one of the most experienced drivers on the grid with one of the most efficient cars as well. And with an efficient car, you can coast less, so makes overtaking very easy. Already up to 13th now, making the overtake on Sete Camara into turn 1. And a very opportunistic move here, going down the hill, going to the outside and letting the drivers on the inside just stack up and have that accordion effect. So yeah, very heads-up driving from him here, making his way through the field, now in the top 5. And yeah, final laps here, you see the two drivers in front, Max Gunther and Dan Ticktum, make contact going up the hill into turn 3. And I want to pause it here. Look at how much smoke is coming off the car of Dan Ticktum. So one, this corner is blind.
Yeah.
And two, from the driver's vantage point, very different from where the camera's sitting right now. You can see absolutely nothing. So taking it easy through this corner, making sure that he doesn't hit any debris or Dan Ticktum.
We're talking about, 17 places.
Yeah.
That's incredible work from Jean-Eric Vergne. And this is why we need to talk about him in relation to Mitch Evans, because of this battle this time last year, almost to the year, where you see here Jean-Eric Vergne in the lead after taking attack mode. Mitch Evans takes attack mode. Interesting, we've got 8 minutes of it for the doubleheader this year. That's more than we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, certainly, and with that extra power comes more strain on the battery. So combined with the ambient temperatures and that extra power, they're going to be very careful. The teams and drivers are going to have to be careful with how much heat they're putting into that battery. So if it overheats, less power, and that's definitely not what you want at the end of the race. As we see here at the end of the race last year, the 3 drivers duking it out, and yeah, one of the 3 most experienced drivers as well. So I think we can expect a very close race and a very close finish like this one.
Well, let's see how this pans out, because we know what happened last year, but can Mitch Evans do it again? This season, time will tell. Back to you, Ranzi.
Time will tell, Saunders, who's now going to hotfoot it over to the commentary booth, because we're now just 5 minutes away from the beginning of FP1. Delighted to be joined by Apta Cooper's Kelvin Delinda and former Formula E champion Nelson Piquet Jr., who, by the way, if you look up a picture of dedication to the cause, you see a picture of this man, because when did you arrive today?
This morning.
And how many hours delayed was your flight?
About 18 hours.
And he's made it here on time. But you've also made it to the track. How was it out there? How is this circuit?
You guys made me drive on a track I didn't know, a Gen 3 car, which is much more powerful than I'm used to, much quicker, much more grip. An amazing track, I must say, and trying to commentate around the lap. I mean, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Luckily, I had 2-3 tries to get it right, but I mean, it was something that I'm not used to do. Anyway, the track is amazing. The track is wide, as you see it. It's a little bit dirty, but I mean, the track is really wide. There's a lot of place for overtaking. This is one of the last hairpins. And it's going to be an amazing race, because there's, I think, close to all the corners you're going to be able to overtake. It's so wide, smooth, and so quick over here. It's going to be one of those fantastic Formula E races as we're used to this season.
We're now just a few minutes away from FP1 beginning. The other person in the commentary booth will be Ollie Askew. Ollie Askew last season, when he raced here, averaged a lap time of about 1 minute and 9. You managed, with off just 3 practice laps, 1:15. So I'll tell you what, you're not that rusty.
Well, I must say, I would have wanted to be a bit closer to that.
That's the sign of a driver, never, ever happy. But Kelvin, let's talk about, first of all, we spoke to David Beckman, by the way, who, what a character he is, I think, new for many of us. In terms of Roberto Mari also joining proceedings as well in Mahindra, how is that feeling? You had it in South Africa, making a rookie debut, no warning, no pre-season build-up, just in. What's that like?
I'm sure the two of them are massively excited. I mean, it's the big stage for them. It's probably the chance they've both been waiting for. Unexpected as well. They're both off the rookie test in Berlin, so they will know more or less what to expect this weekend. But nonetheless, all these boys are halfway through the season. They all know what the new Gen 3 cars are about. So they're up against it this weekend.
And this is Roberto here, by the way, one of the best hairdos on the grid. I think that there's no doubt about that. The curling products he's got in there are bad boys. The Oakleys are looking good as well. But in terms of pressure, will he be under it? Because we were talking about David, who's in a very good package, possibly not as strong a package here, so almost nothing to lose, maybe?
Well, I mean, he is going to be under pressure to try to perform something. Of course, he wants to be in the grid over here for next season, but he's an experienced driver. He's driven a lot of different cars in his life already, so I think he has a little bit more experience and maturity, let's say, than David, which is a young gun. Really wants to be here next year. I mean, I think Mary, he's driven a bit of everything, you know. So, I don't know, it's going to be, one is sitting in a Porsche, one is driving in a Mahindra, which is, you know, a team that has been struggling a little bit this year. So, I think Mary doesn't have any pressure on himself. He's just going to enjoy, try to learn as much as he can, try to help the team as much as he can with the experience he has from F1, F2, everything he's driven already. And let's see, I think David is going to be the one trying to really show something, because obviously he's in one of the best powertrains there is in the grid over here.
But what Roberto does has is an opportunity, because by mutual agreement, Ollie Rowland, formerly of Mahindra, has stepped away from Formula E, certainly for the rest of this season. And he's somebody that you know an awful lot about, Kelvin, because you never know what you're going to get from Ollie. I mean, 6 podiums. He won in Germany, I think, back in season 6. And then sometimes has been a little bit off the ball, struggled in Monaco. But at his best, he's awesome.
Yeah, look, you have to mention the Mahindra powertrain hasn't given him the opportunity to perform the way we all know he can this year. I looked at his data for 3 races long, and he really is a driver that can pull it out the bag, especially in high speed in Saudi. There was some laps in qualifying where you think, man, how did this guy do that? So, no, Ollie will be missed by all the drivers. I think great personality, and all the best to him if he's watching.
I'm sure he's going to be back next year.
Oh, okay. We'd like to...
Well, I mean, he is a talented driver, so, I mean, there's no doubt.
He deserves to be 100%.
Yeah, he'll be back. I mean, I'm sure that he probably was a bit frustrated, you know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't know the relationship exactly between driver and team, but, you know, it happens sometimes for you to get a bit frustrated, you know. Results weren't coming. The team was struggling a bit with the powertrain this season. So, but, you know, everybody knows in this paddock over here the talent that he has, and I bet you know that he's probably going to be back. I'm 90% sure.
We want those Barnsley elbows back out, by the way. But in terms of this race here, predictions, we're going to put these guys on the spot here, but we're going to put you on the spot as well. You can get involved in the FE Predictor. Choose the driver that you think is going to do best. I'm going to chuck it out there, lads. I'm going to go Mitch Evans, currently in 4th place in the standing so far. I think he's the guy in the heat. He did it last year. Can he do it again? What about yourself, Kelvin?
I'm going to go with the same. I think he's on a big roll, a lot of podiums lately. He shows he can bring it up to the front in the race, especially when it gets tricky with the energy management. Last year, great results. So I think that's the guy you got to bet your money on.
Look, Mitch is going to be there for sure.
Ooh.
But I think Nick Cassidy is not going to make it easy. He's been driving amazingly well the last few races. He has the best average of the last 4 or 5 races. So, I mean, just to go a bit different, I would go in Nick Cassidy.
Still a Kiwi.
He's the one that has the momentum, and he just seems to have all the confidence in the car at the moment. So I'm going to go with Nick.
And just very quickly here, it's safe to say this is going to be a special race. Once again, we've seen so much drama this season. It's going to deliver again today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a couple of changes also in the race. So probably see a different style of racing compared to the last events in Monaco, where it was very, let's say, side-by-side racing. Yeah, excited to see it all.
Well, it has to be said, when it comes to the race package here, it's the biggest test that this car's had in the season so far. It's a new car, the Gen 3. How will it fare in the heat and humidity here? Let's find out as FP1 gets underway, and we can hand to our commentator of Saunders, Carmichael Brown.
Hello and welcome. Free practice one of the 10th round of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship. And we have returned, feels great to be able to say that, to Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm Saunders CB, and we are coming off the back of an action-packed race on the streets of Monaco to this beautiful location of Jakarta in Indonesia, where things could not get any more heated. The championship is looking tight, and there's a lot to look forward to this weekend, starting with free practice one. Free practice 2 and qualifying, and the race following tomorrow. Now, if we have a look at what we have to look forward to, because there is a lot to be looking forward to and a lot of challenges, including the heat. We're going to get into that a little bit more later. The heat, the humidity, what that means to the cars, what challenges that added to teams and graphics. But first of all, let's take a look at where we stand with where we're racing this season, with this lovely look at the amazing places that we've got to go to with this championship. So first of all, obviously we're here in Jakarta for this weekend for a double header, 10th and 11th round here, what we've got, Portland coming up next. Another new location for Formula E in the US, Portland, followed by a double header in Italy, a driver and fan favourite in the Formula E calendar, where it all ends in London at the Excel Centre, where the World Championship title will be crowned, both teams and drivers. Now, talking of team standards, here we go. We have another driver joining the championship, another new driver, Roberto Meri. We have David Beckman there, racing for Avalanche Andretti, standing in for Andre Lotterer, who is on Le Mans duties. And there's another fan favourite here, Antonio Felix da Costa, Tag Heuer Porsche Formula E driver, looking for big points on FaceTime there. And Jake Dennis, his hair is very important to him, as you can see from that glorious slow motion clip. And finally, the man of the moment, Nick Cassidy, winning the race in Monaco and goes into this weekend top of the standings, as we can see right here. Here's how things stand with Nick Cassidy at the top, thanks to 5 podiums and 2 wins. Interestingly, the same number of points as Stoffel van Dorn had going into this race exactly a year ago. As we know, he went on to win the championship. You've got Mitch Evans and Jean-Eric Byrne rounding out the top 5. Evans won here last season after that fantastic battle with Jean-Eric Byrne. 6 to 8 separated only by 7 points. And as we look at the second half of the standings, the surprise of Stoffel van Dorn in 11th, and all the way down in 21-22, closing out is the Abt Cooper drivers Robin Freins and Nico Müller. Now let's take a look at how the teams are looking. In the team standings, it's Envision Racing in the lead with 182 points. Tag Heuer Porsche 27 points behind, followed by Jaguar TCS Racing with 156 points. Still close enough for those three, for this title fight to keep going and be interesting for a few more races at least. And let's have a look at where we're going to be racing this weekend and the track itself. It's a 2.37 kilometre, 18-turn circuit, which starts with a very tight opening sector after the rundown from the start-finish straight. Now, after this start-finish straight, there's plenty of room for overtaking into a right-hander at turn 1 before heading into a flowing series of quick turns, tricky sequence into the final sector of this circuit, and a fast right-hander at turn 12. Another long straight just kind of after this fast sector that you're looking at now. Big braking, big regen opportunity here, which is going to be massive when it comes to energy management this season. And on to the final bit here where we complete the lap 18 corners later. That's where we're going to be racing. And now gives me the chance to introduce who is sitting next to me, starting with Oliver Askew, former Indy Lights champion, a Season 8 Avalanche Andretti driver, and you know what, an all-round great guy. Oliver Askew, welcome. Now, you've driven that circuit that we've looked at last season. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, first of all, great to be back here in the booth with you. Yeah, very difficult circuit here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Most interesting part of this track, I think, is that there's no really time to rest until you get to the front straightaway. Yeah, the greatest passing opportunities would be turn 1 and turn 7. And yeah, I think these drivers are in for a tough weekend. It's a double header now. Last year was only a single event. Absolutely. And it's just so hot. So as I said earlier, the the recovery Saturday night is going to be very important, along with going through the data and making sure that you optimize the second day, especially for drivers like our drivers who are making their debuts this week.
Oh yeah, Roberto Meri. We've got David Beckman. I think in terms of you've got to factor in Jake Hughes and Sasha Fenestraz into that, because they haven't driven the circuit before. They may be in the sim, but this is real first-hand experience, and they're going to experience the heat. And a man that has experienced driving in the heat many, many times, also joining us in the booth, former Formula E driver, Season 1 champion, Nelson Piquet Jr. Welcome, Nelson. Good to have you here.
Good to be back. Yeah, I mean, I just drove the car for a couple of laps. What an amazing track. It is an amazing track. I mean, I was trying to, they asked me to try to make a bit of try to speak over through the corners. I mean, I couldn't. It's just, I'm starting to learn how to be a commentator, trying to be on the other side of the car over here. But then they asked me to drive the car and commentate at the same time. It was really tough. So, but the track itself, I mean, it's really quick. You can see a bit of dust here in practice, but that's going to leave, I would say, soon. I mean, I would say by the end of free practice 1, it's going to be much cleaner. And it's very grippy, very wide. I'd say that there's at least 4 overtaking places. And yeah, I mean,
it looks like you were pushing out there.
Well, at some point I was trying to push, but at the same time I was trying to talk, so I couldn't concentrate myself on the driving on the edge and trying to speak. So I tried it for like 4 laps to start. Okay, I'm going to start over speak. Let's start turn 1, and then over the lap, I just couldn't do it. I mean, or I missed the braking zone, or I wouldn't accelerate. I mean, I need to be quiet and drive, or I need to be sitting in the chair and commentating, talking about. I cannot do both at the same time.
You're a racing driver. Once that visor drops, man, there's nothing else matters but going quickly. And we told you we were going to have you on the clock before you went out. So.
One thing is saying, hey, pit that box, okay, and you run to, or you tell your engineer how much energy you have, or he's telling you, okay, try to defend because next lap this is going to happen. But to talk the whole lap about the corner, how wide, how much grip, and the power, I mean, it was just too much. I mean, I just prefer just driving. We're sitting in the air conditioning over here where we are and watching them drive out there.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because, Formula E is often referred to like driving it like playing chess. There's so much to think about whilst you're trying to hit every apex, nail every braking zone, everything like that. Did you find commentating over a lap harder than that?
Yeah, but one thing, drivers, naturally, we know what we do. We're driving, and we can drive and concentrate, think about what's happening. Imagine how much energy the car in front of you is consuming more. He's braking earlier, using more region. All of these things go through our head while we're driving. We're not speaking. One thing is trying to drive on the edge and trying to speak to the fans, to the TV, trying to explain what's going on. It's just something. It's an exercise which I'm not used to it, and just much harder than purely driving, concentrated, looking at your braking points and just trying to extract the most out of the car. That's one thing. But doing all of that while you're speaking and explaining what's going on is just a whole different ballgame, which I'm not used to. Obviously, yourself probably would do a much better job, because for you, talking is normal. It's much easier, And I'm already much more of a quiet guy. Last season, I've been, being with you guys over here. It's been a bit of a learning process, just learning how to, trying to translate a little bit of what's going through their minds to the, to all the public that is watching this race. So it's just, for me, it's all new, and putting myself on a new track with a Gen 3 car, which is very fast. It was just very hard, I would say.
Fascinating stuff. Well, we've got 25.5 minutes left of this session, this half-an-hour session, and there's a couple of things we should probably talk about. Let's have a look.
Push again next lap.
There you go. There's Mitch Evans, engineer, talking to him on the team radio, and that actually leads me nicely into what I wanted to ask you guys. So, I've had the opportunity to go to a couple simulators recently for Neo McLaren and for the Neo 333 racing team, and learn about what they look out for before a race, all of the work that goes in. And one thing that was common between both was that the work in the simulator finishes in free practice 1. Can you elaborate on that? What do they mean by that? What does this add to it?
Yeah, certainly. Simulation in Formula E is so important because these drivers get very little track time before qualifying in a race. And of course, most of these tracks are street courses, and they're not run on until these events. So, yeah, the correlation is what you and the teams are speaking about. Making sure that what teams are finding in FP1 are correlating to what they learned the previous couple of weeks in the simulator. So I would say the biggest thing that they take away from the simulator is the energy management systems and how they go through the lap in the most efficient way possible. And by that I mean going through the lap, saving a lot of energy at the same time going quickly. So that's what efficiency in Formula E means, going fast and saving energy at the same time. So yeah, there's a system that these engineers and drivers go through. Here's a radio from someone.
One more energy save, be proactive on duty. One more energy save.
So this is doing exactly what you're talking about, right? They're now connecting that energy they did in the sim, the software and the strategy, to the real lap.
Yeah, and this is the time to go through energy saving laps, or we call them race mode laps, when the track is green like this. So when it starts to get better, then yes, you can start focusing on qualifying. But right now is when these drivers are trying to make sure their lifting points and regen points around the track are in the ballpark. So they'll be tweaked slightly throughout the weekend as the track continues to get better. But yeah, that's a lot of how the simulator is important in Formula E.
And another very important point that they try to do as well, in the rightwards correlations, is basically line up the results you have in practice to what you have from the simulator, because sometimes the track design or the CAD map that the teams receive from the FIA are not exactly how the real track is. So for example, let's say in one of the corners the radius is much different, or there's much more grip than was in the sim. That's also to make the sim much better for next time they drive. So they try to get as much information from grip, from the curbs, radiuses, I mean all the information to try to make the sim as close as possible to the real. The closer the track is on the sim, the more accurate the results are going to be. And a lot of these teams, they have drivers right now in the simulator back in the factories. After free practice, they'll get the results, they'll tweak a little bit the track back in the factory, and they'll be testing a couple of things, like that the teams, have a few extra bonuses or information to try to be a step ahead of all the competition.
And just to really reiterate this for the audience at home, at the Neil McLaren sim, at their big technology center, there were 1,600 data points for the simulator, just for the car alone. That's 1,600 different things you can tell the computer to change in order to create a more realistic simulation of a track, which is just fascinating. So let's have a look at where we are with just almost 10 minutes gone in this session. Pascal Wehrlein topping the timings, but at this point in free practice, it's not all about that, is it? Let's have a look at this replay. That's one of the Mahindras. I imagine that's probably Roberto getting used to driving these cars. He told me in the track walk today that alongside the Marissa Formula 1 car that he drove, this is one of the hardest things he's ever had to drive, and he's only done the simulator. No, certainly, and we hear time and time again from these drivers and drivers that are new to the series. This is so foreign, this racing championship and this formula of racing. It's so much different to everything else in the world. GT cars, other formula cars. So yeah, there is certainly a learning curve. I went through it last year. And I want to go back to the simulator point. Look at Jake Hughes, a perfect example of a driver who takes the simulator extremely seriously. And he is able to then jump into the series and kind of hit the ground running.
So sector 3 is your strongest at the moment. Sector 2 is where we need to find the most time. So think about your exit through 5.
So there's some critical radio communication there for Mary. Early on in this session, it's important to progress as much as possible because, like I said earlier, there's not much track time that these drivers get. So, yeah, just informing him where he needs to work on, which parts of the track he needs to work on the most. Yeah, there's not much these drivers can really, learn from, for the veterans at least. In the beginning of the session, when the track's green and dusty, we're going to start to focus a lot more on these positions and on the track action as the session goes on.
hard part of driving a new car, I mean, if it were a normal track, that would be fine. You can pick up a car. Doesn't matter how different it is, heavier, different kind of tires. If you're in a normal racetrack, Silverstone, for example, it's not an issue because you go over the limit, you go wide a little bit, it's fine. You learn your limits of the car very quickly. But when you're learning a whole different car, an electric car was, completely different tires, much heavier car that he's used to on a street track, that makes it very hard because of no margin for error. So he is trying to explore and trying to find the limits of the car in a place, in a track where there's no margin for error. So if he passes a braking point, if he goes over a bit too quick on the apex speed of a high-speed corner, that's it. I mean, he'll tap a wall, damage the car a little bit, and then he'll lose track position. So it's very hard for you to learn a new car in a street track. I mean, that's the hardest part of it. It's not only this car being very difficult, which it is a very tough car to drive, but you're learning these cars against drivers that have been here nearly, a lot of them, since season 1. But in a street track, which it is very hard.
Absolutely, I mean, one of the harsh realities of Formula E, but one of the things that why we absolutely love watching it, because it creates very entertaining racing. Now, another thing that we, the viewers, and the teams and drivers will need to be thinking about coming into these races and during sessions like this is some of the changes we have this weekend. We are running for the first time in the Gen 3 era 2 different numbers of laps across the race weekend. In the first race, we have 36 lap race, and in the second, 38 laps. What will that mean for the racing?
Yeah, with longer laps in the race, that means more energy saving, and it's the opposite for the shorter race. So already, though, as we've seen this year, mainly in the last couple of races, we've seen a very different style of Formula E racing, where drivers have to or have been saving a lot of energy in the beginning of the race to then go flat out at the end. So I think we're going to see a similar style race both on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. And this is a track that's fairly difficult to overtake. So once that energy, that target, becomes close to flat out, approaching the final quarter of the race, those first couple of positions may be unchanged. Like we saw in Monaco, for example, the podium was basically decided with 5 or 6 laps to go. So you see Pascal Wehrlein changing tires here.
So interesting point here. So you might have seen, if you're watching the FE show before, I had a chat with Kelvin van der Linde about some of the challenges of the heat in these conditions, and tyres was a big factor, and he was explaining to me about the different types of shoulder on the tyre and how in the heat it makes the ones that are kind of going to be used, I guess, more in this circuit very difficult to manage.
Big front locking at the end of turn 2, for turn 3, and front slip control active turn 7.
That's Nick Cassidy there talking, giving some feedback down the radio to his new engineer. Now, just on the tyre situation, I mean, that might be relevant for what Nick Cassidy just said there. Why does the heat impact the tyre? Is it just about getting it up to temperature and how long it stays in that window, or is there another element to it?
Well, it depends if you're talking about qualifying or the race. In qualifying, I would say that it helps them because they can go out push right away. They don't have to worry about any prep laps to then put their time in qualifying. So the tires should be in a decent window right away as they go onto the start finish line for the first time in quali. So that said, they're only going to last about a lap. And these cars have so much power and so little grip that the traction and slip of the rear axle generates a lot of heat very quickly. And then there's a snowball effect to that as well. These are radial tires, so tires that can perform both in the dry and the wet. You can see, from Jake Hughes there, the grooves in the tires. And so as soon as one of those blocks on the tire start to overheat, it then snowballs through the rest of the tire, if that makes sense. So these are a complete handful to drive because they have a lot of torque, a ton of acceleration, and very low grip. That's great for us watching on TV, but very difficult for the drivers in the cockpit and the teams trying to manage the stability control systems, the braking systems, traction systems, and this very complex vehicle.
Well said, well said. So a lot of things to be thinking about. It's not just about racing like it is normally. This is the heat is a real thing to contend with here, you know, both mechanically and physically.
Yeah, and at the same time we have record ambience and record track surface temperatures. So yeah, it's a lot going on here.
There's Ian James there, team principal of Neo McLaren Racing, did the press conference earlier. Seemed confident, although said that he didn't have any control over preparation for his drivers because they know very much what to do. Here's a replay with Nissan's Sasha Fenestraz. Oh, it's just showing what you said there, the trickiness.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the track being dirty, being dusty as well. We're gonna see a clear evolvement of this track until qualifying, and it's going to get cleaner and cleaner. We're going to see the lines, the racing lines getting darker, getting more grippier, putting down a bit of rubber. So the track is going to be evolving up to the race.
Yeah, that's something we did at Avalanche Andretti last year when we did our simulation prep. We could actually change the track condition in the simulator, and so when we did our race weekend preparation, when we simulated, okay, the practice sessions, the qualifying, getting our lap time in the exact, right part of the short qualifying sessions, we're able to then follow the track progression in the simulator as well, which I think is very crucial for these drivers, with how small the margins are in position. Every 10th, 100th, thousandth of a second helps, and when you can have that extra bit of confidence, like this man Jake Dennis on screen with a couple of purple sectors has himself, it's very crucial.
Looks like he's doing a full power lap there. Jake Dennis, now, this weekend is massive for him because this season so far, in team principal Roger Griffiths of his team there, your old boss, and interesting that...
An all-around great guy.
An all-around great guy, that's the new catchphrase of the commentary booth. Jake Dennis has got a lot to do this weekend because he has returned to form, but this season it's kind of been all or nothing. It's been a podium or no points, and you can't do that in Formula E. It's about consistency.
It is, and Mr. Consistent, Nick Cassidy, on top of the points championship at the moment. Historically, though, Jake has always been strong in the last half of the season. So, yeah, he was a rookie 2 years ago, but for the last 2 years, he's always turned it on in the last bit. So I don't know what it is if he decides to wake up and show up to work and as the season goes on, but I think we can expect him to have a strong run at this championship this year.
Well, just to sprinkle a little bit more of excitement onto this, whatever we're waiting. London, Jake Dennis has won twice, and that's where we're ending this season. So could we see this spectacular finish in London for the season finale doubleheader? We'll see. Now we're looking at now riding with David Beckman, who is standing in for Andre Lotterer. Interestingly, talking to him earlier, one advantage he has over, let's say, the complete comparison with Roberto in Mahindra is that the rookie session that David did for Andretti, only in Berlin a couple of weeks ago, he was actually looking at energy when no other rookies were doing that. Obviously, if there's a privacy or confidentiality issue there, if you go to another team, you could share the secrets, but he had that time because they knew that he was going to be driving this weekend. So it's given him a bit of an advantage that a lot of other rookies coming in for a one race or two race don't have. How much do you think that will make a difference? Or is the sheer learning curve of driving these cars going to be enough to challenge him?
He has been a driver over the past few months, and even last year as well. When I was racing for Avalanche Andretti, he was our reserve driver.
Sure. Yeah.
Now a Porsche Works reserve driver, but he has a lot of simulator experience, so he knows the systems of the car. He's worked with these exact engineers, as we see in our picture now. And the Porsche Works car that he drove at the rookie test is basically the same as the Avalanche Andretti car. So they partner together. They have the same powertrain, the same system. So look, he's a racing driver. He has experience in other categories. When it's time to shut the visor, as we said earlier, it's time to go. And energy saving is not the most enjoyable thing. Sometimes we want to go out there and let it eat. So I think that's what will come naturally to him.
Potentially that style of racing, how did you say it? go in.
Go out there and let it eat.
Let it eat. Okay, I've heard that before. Maybe we'll see more of that this weekend because, you know, talking to a few different drivers in the paddock, the consensus is that we're potentially not going to have the same sort of slipstream racing and not wanting to lead that we've had in previous races because there are so many sections of this track where you can save without consequence, if that makes sense, without the risk of being overtaken. You can use the energy you've saved to defend. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true, I would say.
Good. I'm glad.
That's where the veterans really set themselves apart, you know, by what we call freestyling in the car during the race and not sometimes going against the energy saving system in the car, the tones, the regen tone and the coast tone in the car, which will get you to the end of the race. But in a racing situation, when you're around other cars, sometimes you need to spend more energy in one side of the track to go on the offensive, and then, you know, save energy on the other side where you can when there's no passing opportunities. So yeah, definitely some traffic there as we go within 10 minutes to go.
As we come into the final 8.5 minutes, let's have a look at timings because it's only a free practice one session. There are different programs going on, but if we're just looking at pace using the full power modes, Pascal Wehrlein and Jake Dennis are exactly where they need to stay for the remainder of the weekend. But it's not as easy as that because their qualifying duels are unforgiving and the race even more so.
No, and like Nelson said, until the very last lap of qualifying, the track's just going to continue to get better. So yeah, you can look good now, and you know it's all happy within the garage. But you make a mistake on the last lap of quali, then it's not looking so good. So you know we see the top 10 covered by just over 3/10, but it's not going to look like.
Let's have a little replay here of this Sergio City camera moment. Yeah, sideways. That looks quite hairy.
Quick.
It looks quick, but he's holding on. He's letting it eat. He's letting it eat. Sergio City camera, a driver that, you know, the Neo 333 team have had a handful of decent performances on one lap pace from, you know, qualifying has been good. They've been up there. But then, yeah, the races have been struggling. And if you look on the left-hand side of the screen now, you see this new telemetry graphic. It's currently on DS Penske driver Jean-Eric Verne. When you see the blue, that's the throttle, and the green going to the rear of the car is the regen. That's the recuperation of energy back into the battery. Now, one thing you'll notice by looking at that graphic, there's no braking. This is all recouping energy every time they lift off the accelerator, which is a huge part of Formula E, even more so this season. Nelson, now you've driven the Gen 3 car, the whole braking system was different. Talk to us how that felt.
Yeah, I mean, what I can tell you physically, when you get into the corners, and obviously you're still holding the brakes while you're turning into the apex of the corner, the steering wheel is so heavy because you have the front region working, recovering the energy. And I was speaking earlier to friends.
Quick look at that. We'll come back to you in a second, Nelson. That's a bit of a spin and running off from the Nissan of, was that Sasha Fenestraz?
I think that was Norman.
It was Norman Nato. And now we're on board with DaCosta. Sorry, Nelson, continue.
Yeah, and I was speaking to Robin Friends, and he was saying that it's after his accident and after he broke his hand, it's been so hard for him, especially when you get into the corners, because you have to muscle the car so much, because you have the front recovering a lot of energy at the same time. And the car, it's just such a complex system, but at the same time, physically, it's very hard because you have the front motors recovering energy, and so you go into these corners and the front becomes really heavy. And I felt, obviously, I wasn't in the limit like these guys are. I mean, I was lapping a couple of seconds slower, but it is a very tough car to drive. You know, I mean, it's very different. Especially from the Gen 1 car, which we recovered just a little bit on the rear axle. And now it recovers all around the two axles. So it is a much more complex car. I mean, you see all these drivers doing a couple of mistakes, locking up sometimes, this and that, but it's just, when you put everything together, radial tires, heavy car, a lot of power, dirty tracks, I mean, all of this complex system, you know, it is very, very hard. I mean, sometimes we see other series and we look at them driving on TV, and it just seems like they're driving in the train rails. Nobody does mistakes and nothing happens. It's very different driving a Formula E car. You get all of these other drivers in different series, put them over here. They're going to do the same amount of mistakes or even more mistakes. I mean, normal mistakes, human mistakes in the session, because you're driving in such difficult conditions compared to two different series.
Okay, you're in sector 3. Turn it up.
It looks like someone might have hit the wall entry into turn 7 there. Some of the banners being scruffed off the entry wall.
Someone pushing the limits there. So, so far, just looking at the running, interestingly, we do have, we're looking at the timings with Max Günther at the top of the timings there with a 109.2. Both Günther and Mortara are actually up on last year's fastest race lap time, which you would expect given the extra power and everything with the Gen 3 car. But, you know, it's about, we're looking about half a second quicker, which is decent so far in a free practice 1 with the very dusty conditions the first running.
Yeah, that is, and we started the season, you know, in that same window of last year's car performance. But now, with time and experience with these engineers and drivers alongside this new Gen 3 car, it's gotten a lot better. They're starting to get the full potential out of this thing, and we see that in the characteristic of the car going around the track. From this visual, we see that these drivers are really getting the most out of them. They're much more confident with the car, you know, stepping out, being sideways, and you know, they're really hustling it around the track. As Nelson was speaking to, these guys are definitely earning their money now.
So there we saw one of the Neo 323 drivers, I think behind Dan Tixim, who's on screen now, going through the attack mode loops. Interestingly, this weekend the attack mode is an 8-minute use over each race. So yeah, that's longer than we've had, I think, so far this season. How might that impact things? Because, you know, running at higher power is going to mean more, I guess, put more pressure on the battery.
Well, it's probably the hottest weekend we're going to face the whole season. So I mean, it's going to be tough on the drivers, on the tires, on the battery, on everything. So it is going to be interesting to see how the teams are going to adapt and how they're going to be, you know, how they're going to deal with this. Because I think Formula E, they're just trying to, once in a while, throw a little bit of spice into these races, just make things a bit different, you know, especially like doing Saturday and Sunday, doing 2 different length of races, just to make it a little bit different and make it a bit harder for the drivers and for the teams. So it is going to be, you know, temperature-wise, it's going to be very tough in all aspects for the car, for the driver. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen.
There was Jake Dennis there going a little bit sideways into that last corner, but we like to see that. It's controlled. It looks good.
Yeah, I was speaking to Jake just before this session, you know, asking him what he thought about his chances this weekend, and he said, yeah, we're always strong in the race, but we seem to struggle in qualifying. And I asked why, and he said he wasn't happy with his traction. And as we see there from that replay, you know, the car dancing around a lot, as they leave the corner and accelerate away from the corner.
Good insight. I like that.
And obviously, these systems
are all over the place.
Everyone's all over the place.
And TC obviously is forbidden in this series, like most of the series. But these systems, they're so advanced and they're so good. There's so many technical people trying to develop this software. Some teams do have a bit of an edge in trying to control the traction, you know. So I do think that there are some softwares and some powertrains that have a bit more of something to help the drivers, because it's so much power we're talking about and so little grip out of the tires that it's not a coincidence that when one car of the same team is struggling, the other car is also struggling, you know. I mean, usually you see both of them, you know, towards the bottom of the pack or towards the front of the pack. I mean, that's not a pure coincidence because of drivers. That just means that
we can keep
their
pushing
powertrain.
Go mod 1, energy save, mod 1, energy save, and X31 when you can.
So that's Beckman's engineer talking to him, saying he can still push. Currently running 15th in the timings, about almost 9/10 off the pace, while Max Günther and Stoffel van Dorn are the top 2 with Eduardo Mortara. Interestingly, that's a 1-2-3 Stellantis powertrain. which is the powertrain subject is something we've talked about a few times this season. We've talked about with Jaguar and the Envisions, we've talked about with the Porsches and the Andrettis, and now it looks that the top three are juggling between themselves, all powered by that same Stellantis powertrain.
Yeah, we see checkered flag out on FP1. The cars still continuing to finish their final push laps here on a Friday evening in Jakarta. You have 1-2 for Maserati at the moment, as you said. Porsche powertrains faring well in 4th and 5th.
Oh, just pipped by his teammate Maximilian Günther. Great show of pace from the Maserati MSG racing team so far. A great place to start this weekend. Obviously, there's so much more to come. Another practice session, qualifying in the race. But if you're a driver coming into a circuit like this, which already has the challenges that we've talked about, and even by the likes of Maserati, who haven't had the best season, bar the one podium, this is a good place to start in terms of confidence in the team.
It is, but we've seen this in the past, you know, in free practice sessions. This isn't the first time we've seen Maserati, perform well in a practice. And we're talking about practice.
Just the conversion, though, right?
Yeah, of course they're doing well, and they need to finish and continue this momentum into the weekend when it really matters. The points are paid on the afternoon of Saturday and Sunday. I mean, these guys can smile certainly, but they need to continue working.
So next up on the agenda of this free practice session is the practice starts. Now that's kind of another area where we see what you were talking about, Nelson, and the software traction controls. There's no real traction control in these cars, but there's elements they can do with the software to help that instant power being pushed to the tyres, and that's something that every team has their own way of managing. But
yeah, I mean, I've had my couple of seasons of us trying to go around the gray areas to try to find a bit of traction, trying to find a bit of help from the software to assist us and all that power. Obviously in season, the Gen 1, Gen 2 car didn't have as much power as this one, so it didn't make that much of a difference. But for sure, with this amount of power that they have, a smart software and something where you guys can tune it up around the gray areas of the regulation, which is what every team does. It's always trying to find the little loopholes that there is in the regulations to try to, help the driver as much as they can. So, yeah, a lot of teams.
What?
Every team tries to do that.
You said I had 2 laps.
Some of them.
I was pushing now.
Have probably found a bit.
So Nick Cassidy not happy there with his team. Just listening in there, so Nick Cassidy not happy with his team there. He thought he had more time to run. He was still doing push laps, and they've just been told the session's over. So he feels like he had more on the table by the sounds of it, Ollie.
Yeah, strange that one.
Yeah,
but sometimes you're so...
7 tenths off, but as I said, less than a tenth, sector 1 and 3, and as you said, that...
Sounds like some energy reading there going from the DS Penske team with Jean-Eric Verne. We watch these practice starts. Just another reminder that we're looking at the top 3 timings of this session. Maximilian Günther, Eduardo Mortara, Stoffel Van Dorn, all 3 powered by that same Stellantis powertrain. Doesn't mean much at this point, but it's a good way to start. It's a good showing of pace, which is exactly where you want to be, knowing the races we have ahead.
Going a little bit about what Nick Cassidy was complaining. Sometimes we don't realize, the team doesn't realize how concentrated and focused we are in the car, and time just flies by sometimes, and checker flag comes out and you're like...
Just to notice, sorry, quickly, while we're in the shot, you'll see a big figure missing here in the garage. Sylvain Filippi not there with the Envision Racing team. His driver is leading the championship currently, not having the man at the head there, the soothing voice. Is that going to make things difficult for the team? Is it going to be a different experience for them? Anyway, let's see how we fared after free practice 1. Maximilian Günther tops the timings with 1:8.9. Eduardo Mortara, his teammate behind. Stoffel Van Dorn, DS Penske, just behind that. Topping out the top 5 is Mitch Evans, Jaguar TCS Racing, and Pascal Wehrlein, Tag Heuer Porsche. Sebastian Buemi right down there in 10, Envision Racing. Again, kind of following that trend that we've seen now of outpacing his teammate who's at the top of the standings, Nick Cassidy. We've got Dan Ticktum in 11th with the Neo 333 Racing team. We've got René Rast in 15th, his teammate Jake Hughes, Neo McLaren behind. Now I think they would have liked to have a better running than that in this practice session, but there is another one tomorrow, and there in 22nd is Robin Friends and Abt Cupra. So that's how everybody fared in this first free practice session. let's have a look at some of the key moments. So let's talk about this, guys, because we're one session in to Jakarta. We've got a doubleheader this weekend. There's a lot of challenges. This man is currently the quickest, but this is very much the start of a difficult weekend, because I don't think anybody really knows how hard that second race is going to feel.
Yeah, and we don't really know how these teams are going to continue their progression through the weekend. So a lot of late evenings, late nights. And yeah, recovery is going to be extremely important as well. Not only for the drivers, but for obviously for the racing cars as well. Finding the correct energy management through the races, and I think we're going to see a couple ice baths behind the garage this weekend with how hot it is and how important that that recovery is going to be for these athletes.
Da Costa said something interesting earlier. He said, "New team, same pool." He's got the boy Sam Bird. Doesn't look over the moon with his. He's there. I mean, P7 currently with his lap time, but maybe there was a few things that he thinks could have gone better. Or I'm just massively overreading 4 seconds of his face. Who knows? Who knows? There's the man at the top of the standings, Nick Cassidy, with the Envision Racing team. Now, we're only free practice 1 in. Really, qualifying is where it's going to count, and then into the race. But this guy has shown a level of consistency that we haven't seen from him so far in his Formula E career. He's before Monaco, he's sort of been the silent assassin, just going about getting up good points, getting podiums, being there, but without really the focus or attention or the target. But now the target is very much on his back. Yeah,
he's a bit of an Iceman. Nick Cassidy, cool, calm, collected. He's a former champion. Yeah, you see.
There's Maximilian Günter to the top. Now let's have a look at some of the action that unfolded in this free practice 1 session. Nick Cassidy heading out for the session. There he is on track. He felt he had a little bit more to give in that session. It was almost cut short. Timing wasn't quite on board. Maybe that's a consequence of not having the team boss here. Big lock up and slide there for the Mahindra of Roberto Meri while he gets used to this new style of driving, this new car, this new circuit, new everything pretty much for the Spanish driver. Is Sasha Fenestraz having to almost dodge cars as he overshoots that corner almost a little bit and has to avoid the Mahindra ahead.
Yeah, maybe some target fixation on the car in front of him, taking the attack mode loops, maybe not looking to the apex where he should, and turned in on the marbles, got the car loose. Yeah, difficult when you have cars on different strategies out there on track.
There's an onboard
things, and onboard of Jake Dennis. You see how small the margins are around this track in that high-speed section. Norman Nato, I believe, having a spin in the hairpin. I mean, this is the time to push. This is the time to see the limit of the car. Obviously, if you have a touch with anything, they have some time to make repairs overnight. But that's worst case scenario.
But the driver at the top, or the drivers at the top, I should say, the Maserati MSG Racing team with the 2 fastest times of the weekend so far. But there is a lot more to come. Now, this man, Pascal Wehrlein, led the championship from round 2 all the way up to our last round in Monaco. Nick Cassidy, now Sam Bird saying it's hot there. We can all feel that, although it's quite chilled in here.
It's freezing in here.
It's freezing in here. Dan Tickton there, immediately taking that race suit off, because I imagine he is absolutely sweltering in that race suit in the 35-degree heat and almost 85% humidity that we've seen. There's the happy chappy Maximilian Günter. A little cheeky wink there. Did you see that? Little wink to the camera.
All about the hair, huh?
He's very happy with that lap time.
He's winning practice.
He's winning.
He can be happy.
He's winning practice. Okay, it's a good start. It's a good start for him. And then there's Jakarta International Stadium in the background. This track being in the shadow of that circuit in Jakarta, in the Ancol Beach area. But yes, free practice 1 complete. It's the 2 Maserati MSG racing cars at the top, but there is a lot more action to come. Stay tuned.